Welcome to Petrolicious Talks, conversations, stories, and deep dives celebrating all the automotive world has to offer. Join me, Afshin Behnia, founder of Petrolicious, as we chat with designers and drivers, enthusiasts and entrepreneurs, collectors and craftsmen, examining what they drive and what drives them. Today's guest is Ralph Gilles, head of global design at Fiat Chrysler Automobiles. At only 14 years old, he sent a sketch to Lee Iacocca, where Chrysler's design chief insisted he attend design school. The rest was history. His resume includes the Chrysler 300, which won the 2005 North American Car of the Year, as well as the Dodge SRT Viper. While Ralph is at the forefront of shaping the future of automobiles, he always carried a genuine passion for the past. His garage includes a custom-built Alfa Romeo GT8 Tribute, a Lancia Delta Integrale, and a 1968 Dodge Charger. We'll be learning more about his personal project cars, his role at FCA, and the state of the industry on today's Petrolicious podcast. I'm here today with Ralph Gilles, head of design for FCA. Please welcome Ralph. How are you, Ralph?
Hi, pleasure to be on with you, Afshin.
It's nice to have you. You have had quite a career at FCA. Previously, you were president and CEO of Motorsports. You were president and CEO of the SRT brand, as well as the Dodge brand, in charge of design for interior and other brands. So I'm speaking with a pretty important person at FCA right now.
I guess so. All I think about is how crusty and old I am.
You're a pretty young executive.
Relatively.
So what's a typical week like for you?
Wow, that's a good question. Lately, it's been obviously different, but typically a lot of design reviews. So we still deal in, basically we're working about 5 years ahead of the marketplace. So on any given day, if I were to walk through a typical studios and all our brands are kind of sequentially laid out in the building, I look at sketches. That's the thing I kind of always lurking around the studios looking for that one sketch that will stimulate an idea or be the next car,
Nice.
And that's a fantasy part of it. The other drudgery, I guess, or the fun part, and sometimes is when you get that sketch turned into 3D. We start with scale models, and eventually full size, and that's a really exciting process. But it's kind of a competition. You might have 4 themes, then down to 3, then down to 2, and then the big showdown in the dome when my boss makes the final call.
So as head of design, having worked your way up there, so today, how much actual personally do you get involved in individual cars' designs and directions and determining, the look for the next generation?
Well, we've got to take a couple steps back and understand what FCA is now. A lot of people don't even know what FCA means. It sounds like a bank sometimes, when you hear the name. But Fiat Chrysler Automobiles is obviously a merged company of Fiat, which is Maserati, Alfa Romeo, one of my favorite brands of all time, Fiat Lancia, and Iveco trucks, based out of Turin. And they're very, very big and popular in Latin America as well. Then you have ourselves, Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, and now Ram. So I kind of oversee all of those products, and I do touch all of them, and that's quite a challenge because I have to physically get myself to Italy. We do a lot of telepresence every month, every couple of weeks. We meet with our guys in Brazil. We have a good-sized studio in Brazil, about over 160 people now, and then Turin and Michigan are about the same size. They're about 400 plus people, including clay modelers, designers, 3D digital surfacers, all kinds of talent there. And then a budding studio in China. So I have to coordinate all that together.
Right.
And I almost have an out-of-body experience. It's a lot of brands, right? They're all very, very different. We try to keep.
And they're all like very exciting brands. We're talking about, true enthusiast brands from Alfa Romeo, Jeep, SRT. These are not commuter brands. These are true enthusiast brands.
Yeah. I'm kind of against commodities, right? Really try really hard to keep the brands separated and give them their own special sauce. That's part of the magic. Right. And what my old boss, he's deceased now, Sergio Marchioni, was a big brand guy. He was really big into separating the brands, and so much so that he gave each brand a shepherd. So that's why my job at one time was shepherding the Dodge brand. And eventually the SRT brand was its own brand for about 5 years.
Right.
So it really puts the importance on developing the brand from head to toe, basically.
Yeah, that's great. And so, so now you work with the head of design for each of those brands, and you give them guidance as to.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what I did. It wasn't that way in the beginning. I was really trying to do it all myself, and it was quite hard, especially on the U.S. side. So I put Klaus Bussa, who's in charge of the Italian side, and under him, he's got a guy that does the Maseratis and the Alfas, and then an interior dedicated guy. And I have the same setup in the States. So he does the day to day. He does
Yeah,
all the.
I had the pleasure to meet him in Milan, or actually in Turin,
Yeah,
last year. So
no,
yeah,
he's a
great guy.
designer's designer. He dresses so much better than I do. I'm so jealous of his wardrobe. He's so
Uh-huh.
tall. He's like 6'7". He has to have almost everything custom made, anyways.
Yeah, I was surprised to see him fit into a Alfa Romeo 4C.
Oh my God! And used to have a Crossfire. His knees were almost to his ears when he drove it. It was quite hilarious.
Wow.
He loves cars so much he squeezes in them.
Yeah,
But yeah, so it's this idea of working with them, but also the brand heads. I mean, the brand heads are typically sales guys that have kind of been elevated to run the brands, and they're not necessarily designers, but they do have very strong opinions and, of course, a vision for where they want to take their respective brands.
for sure.
Yeah.
You're obviously from a very young age, a true car enthusiast, mainly growing up with muscle cars, but also into Alfa Romeos, as you said, more recently, and Lancias. You shared with me a really cool build that you just completed, the GTA Tribute car.
Yeah.
Love the look and sound of that. You want to take us through what you
Yeah.
just finished doing?
So I'm sure you've had Dorian on your show. Dorian.
Oh yeah, Dorian.
Yeah.
We've featured him in a film. He's a good friend. Yeah.
Yeah, I met him because of your show. Actually, I found out about him. I was looking for a mechanic to work on my daughter's Fiat 500 out west. And I flew over there and he let me borrow his shop and we worked together. And then, of course, at the corner of the shop is this familiar, that shape I love so much, the GT body style, the 105s. And I asked him, what is that car? It was under a cover. And we kind of pulled the cover and it's a step nose. I've always wanted a step nose. I mean, I've had GTVs.
They're so gorgeous.
Yeah, there's something. And Giugiaro is probably my favorite designer of all time. And that was really one of his coming out cars. So I looked at the car and it was kind of 3/4 done. The bodywork was stunning, but the engine was just not done at all, so it didn't really run well. And he's so busy, he ran out of time. And I made him a deal. And it was one of those things where I didn't have time to ask my wife yet. And the car was on a
Ask
hauler.
for forgiveness later, exactly. That type of thing. Yeah.
It was on a hauler and in Michigan, literally almost beat me home,
Right.
So then, of course, I called my friends at Alphaholics and started ordering parts. And it's one of those things. The last one I did was a full rotisserie restoration. This one just was literally bolt-ons. And my favorite thing is the engines. I love building engines. It's a cathartic thing. I kind of zone out, measuring things and putting it together. And it's so satisfying, to watch, you hear it run for the first time.
Absolutely. And this one has a later 2-liter, is that correct?
Yeah, it's a twin spark. And I was able to find, Alphaholics had one laying around, a valve cover that sort of emulates the original 1600 twin spark. Those are untouchable. Those engines, as you know, are so valuable. But I do like a little more, gusto in it to drive it. So I thought a modern day twin spark, but I tried to make it look older. I put the distributor. I could have done a hidden multi what do you call that, ignition system, but I actually use a distributor that simulates the original 8 plug distributor. And then hidden Genv makes this really cool carburetor / injectors. It looks like a carburetor, but it's actually throttle bodies. So when you open the hood, it feels more period correct, but it does drive like a modern car. It fires right up
and it certainly sounds period correct, even though you put in fuel injection, right? It still sounds like it's got Weber carbs on it. It sounds beautiful.
Those 45 millimeter trumpets, just unbelievable. I mean, I almost want to drive with the windows down, my head out the window. If it's 30 degrees, I don't care. Just to hear it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here, I'm gonna play a little bit of the engine noise of you driving through the gears for people to check it out. What else you got in your personal collection? I know you have a Lancia Delta Integrale.
Integrale is one of those cars. Again, it was a bringer trailer car where I've been watching them all over for years, trying to find a decent one. And I bought it in sight unseen, flew to New York, drove it home the very same night. We landed at 8, went to the guy's house, picked up the car, and drove it straight back home. all the way from downtown. You literally lived in Manhattan. I couldn't believe it. It was a very long drive. And the car was a good car. The car was really good. It just needed a gasket unfortunately, behind the clutch. So I had to take the engine out and took the chance to freshen everything. I put fresh rings in it and redid the heads, the valves, and it runs so good. It is such a fun car. I get it now. It's one of those cars you hear about and you're afraid to meet your heroes,
Right.
And I finally
lives
got
up
it.
to the experience.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh my gosh. I just wish I lived closer to windier roads. But other than that, it's,
Oh yeah.
and people get it. I'm surprised. I live in Michigan, and these cars, the muscle car thing is so big here. But you drive this thing around, and a lot of the guys understand exactly what it is. They go, "Nice Lancia," and they know exactly what the car is all about. So it's cool.
Nice.
Yeah. And then on my other end of my spectrum, I have the Demon. This crazy. This thing lifts its wheels off the ground when you hit the gas.
Right.
So I go from a Giulia to a Demon.
Nice. I like it.
So it depends what mood I'm in, I guess. Yeah. But I'm really lucky. Honestly, I live in a very remote area. Rent is cheap, so to speak. So I spend some of my money on cars.
So are you contractually required to keep your collection to FCA brand cars?
No. I've had a people ask me that all the time, actually. And loyal, we're still that company that if you drive a foreign car to work, they make you park in the back 40. That's still the case.
Right.
Oh yeah, it's kind of a leftover thing from the back in the day in Michigan. But
that's right.
I have the only non FCA product I have now is just a Porsche, a 911 Porsche. Whatever. And I have a special place in my heart for Porsches. I think every car guy does,
Yeah, you can't be into cars and not like a Porsche.
Yeah.
I got to drive a Viper SRT back in like 2015, and I've always been much more of a small, nimble car type of guy, not a big power muscular guy, and so I had my biases against it. I thought this is going to be a ton of power that you can't control and no handling, but I was blown away by how controllable, predictable, communicative that car was. And I was driving it around. It was a press car, obviously, driving around in Mulholland, and the more you pushed it, the smaller it felt and the more sure-footed it felt. So I was really
I have the
impressed
biggest
by that car.
grin on my face because you're saying that, because I can't tell you how many people I run into, because I've had Vipers now forever. I have two now. I have an ACR that I take to the track and a GTS that I drive on the street. And I've always purposely would find Porsche driving school days or, everything but normal, And I would open the Viper and they always sneer at you like, oh, he's going to be the first one in the ditch,
Yeah.
Yet the Viper was easily the fastest car at the track every time. And I couldn't believe it. And they always come up to you, what's going on? And then you walk around the car, the double wishbone. That car is basically a story of setup. In the Gen 5, the engineers got the Gen 5 right. They really stabilized the rear end and revised the strength of the chassis. Once the platform got stiff, the car came together. It's got an amazing amount of rubber, but if you can't put it down, So the Gen 5s are truly, I love their description, because to me, it feels like a leather jacket like a tight fitting jacket. The more you drive it, it shrinks around you. And most people don't realize the car is 2 inches shorter than 991. I mean, it looks big because of the way the proportions are, but it's actually shorter than a 911.
Exactly. You don't in photos don't do it justice, because it looks like a huge car, but once you walk up to it, you realize how small it is, and when you drive it, it even feels smaller in a good way. Like, really enjoyed it. So you said you guys are designing 5 years out, pretty much. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
What obviously without revealing anything that you can't reveal, what are some general trends that we should be expecting 5 years down the line?
Oh, absolutely. The electric thing is coming. I mean, it's we're getting to the point now where the cost of electricity and the cost of, let's say, compliance, we call it in the industry, when you look at what has to be done to a gas engine, it basically has to be a hybrid. Almost all cars in the next 5 years will either have to be hybrid or electrified. And by the time if you think about a hybrid car, it's basically two powertrains in one and a battery, right? You got electric, gas, and all that. So your costs start to almost be equal, if not slightly more than an electric car. At the same time, battery density is getting a lot better. There's much more suppliers out there making the parts. A lot of OEMs are investing in it. Gas is actually in one way, kind of doing the opposite of what we thought. Gas is not getting more expensive; it's actually going the other way, which challenges the consumer behavior. In some countries, they're doing a lot of incentives for people to buy electric cars. In others, it's a very different story. So that's always going to be something where the market preference is is a little tricky. And our job is basically to try to not make the electric car a begrudging choice, but something people actually want, and they are fantastic to drive. It's just the cost. By the time you get one right, it tends to be a $50,000-$60,000 car. So that's the nut we're trying to crack right now is how do we electrify and start dedicated platforms. I think adapted platforms can work, but as you get into the future, you're going to see more and more dedicated platforms that are designed around electric cars and don't need certain things and don't have certain things because of that. So it's a lot of fun for me. It's a new chapter of design, new opportunities to push and pull the forms around.
Right. Yeah, I saw the unveiling of the new Fiat 500 that's all electric, and was pretty impressed by that presentation, especially the range and the whole, ground up electric philosophy. I could totally see a driving enthusiast having one of those as their daily commuter, and then having a, either a vintage or purely gas powered car for carving the canyons. So, should we be worried that there's not going to be that choice for having an all-gas, fun car for the weekend in the future?
When I look at the data, and we spend a lot of time futuring and looking at data, and it looks like for as long as you and I are alive, I think electric cars are probably going to approach about 30% of the market at some point in the next 5 to 10 years. Not 100%, and that's just not, the infrastructure is not there for it. And gas cars are still really, really good cars and getting cleaner every day as well. But I think there's going to be choices. I think we're going to live in a time when it's up to you to choose. I mean, and based on your circumstance, if you're, in Europe, in certain cities, they're making it quite, interesting to have an electric car. Some of them don't quite have the infrastructure, but they're banning gas cars in certain city centers during certain times. That's where we're going, kind of the plug-in hybrid route, where you can at least switch the car to electric when you need it. So it's going to be a lot of different solutions, but ultimately, I would say, 20 years from now, most cars will probably be electric. But there's still going to be some gas cars. I don't think they're going to ban them off the universe, but because there's still some, just like we still have horses today. We don't, we don't take them to the corner store, but we still race them and enjoy them.
But some European cities are really trying hard to ban cars in general.
Yeah. And to me, it's a shame because modern cars are very, very clean. I mean, I think some of the heavy industry is still hasn't caught up to the modern day car. Some of this trucking industry is still a little bit behind. And that's where most of the pollution tends to come from is the heavy duty trucking,
Right.
Big older diesels and stuff. And older cars in general, getting newer cars on the road.
Last year, we launched Petrolicious membership to empower and elevate our community who celebrate the Drive Tastefully ethos. From weekly member-exclusive films exploring the world's finest homologation specials or storied classic car workshops, to our quarterly print publication Drive Tastefully, Petrolicious membership is your gateway into the most exclusive automotive content, period. Members receive priority access and preferred pricing to our classic car rallies and gatherings around the globe, and special member pricing on all goods and gear in the Petrolicious shop. Membership is 50% off during our special quarantine pricing starting at $29 per year. Visit us at petrolicious.com to learn more. From a design perspective, again, looking 5+ years down the line, anything that you can share with us as far as cues we should expect? One personal pet peeve of mine is size. Is this size creep going to continue forever? I mean, it can't, obviously, because roads are so
think
big.
It's peaked. That's a very good point. We talk about that a lot, actually. I think the sizing is somewhat peaked. There's still going to be segments like the big E SUVs that are just, there's actually people that really, really like that size. But a lot of what you're understanding about size, the reason the cars have gotten so big is because the safety standards have gotten so intense that we need the crush space. You need room for the deceleration to happen. So that's some of the reason the cars have gotten bigger. Some of it's choice. I mean, we're able to make the cars bigger, but they're actually getting lighter now. Even though they're larger, they're actually less heavy than their smaller counterparts. So there are some kind of pros and cons. And then, of course, the CAFE system has rewarded what they call the footprint of the car. So the longer the wheelbase and the wider the track, puts on a different yield curve, right? So that also has driven the cars to be a little bit bigger than they probably normally would be. But I do think it's peaked. I think we're finding that, especially with electric cars, you don't need the overhangs as much. You can actually make the passenger space, dedicate more of the car to passenger than to mechanicals.
Right.
So that's going to change.
Yeah. I've always thought, and this is, I'm going to kind of bitch and moan for a second because it's not every day that you get to have the head of design of one of the most major automotive manufacturers listening to you. So, I feel like the size and safety factor have become so ridiculous. On the one hand, we're talking about safety. As long as motorcycles are legal and allowed on the roads, I feel this whole safety thing is a little bit hypocritical on the parts of governments and regulatory bodies. Like, if I can get on a motorcycle, that is probably the most lethal thing I can drive. Why can't I choose to have like a fun sports car that maybe doesn't have 700 airbags and so much padding around me and so forth? And after all, I can get in my '56 Giulietta Spider, which is also a death trap, and drive that. What if I'm happy with like '90s era level of safety and want something lighter and more compact and so forth? So, and I know you're you're head of design. You're not a regulator, so I just wanted to kind of air this out. And
No, I feel
and
you.
the fact that the size also impacts. You can't just proportionally make everything bigger and expect it to remain looking good because it's all relative to the human body as well. So, I just wanted to get that out.
No, that's a challenge we have. And that's one of the reasons, if you've noticed, wheels have gotten bigger and bigger, diameters of wheels, overall diameters. We have minivans with 20-inch wheels, which that used to be, unique for supercars at one time. And a lot of that is designed to hide the size of the car, actually, to manage the scale by growing the diameters of the wheels.
Exactly.
But one of the cars I own, actually, the 4C, is to me one of those nice cars that actually gone the other way. Light. It's 2,400 pounds. It's super small and short, and I love that car because it is safe. It's perfectly safe. But you can make cars smaller. You just have to use some pretty exotic materials and really some cool engineering. But I think about that all the time. I have the exact same thought when I jump into my Julie. I don't feel necessarily safe compared to when I drive my 2,500 diesel Ram truck.
Right, exactly.
But we design for the masses, unfortunately, so we have to kind of adhere to that. But yeah, that's an interesting thought.
It'll be interesting if in the future there's any way to get, and this is a pipe dream because I know regulatory bodies don't think this way, but if there could be a carve out for more recreational type road vehicles that are not designed to be everyday driver cars, but like your weekend canyon carver that might be subject to slightly more lenient standards of safety and other things.
Yeah, they do that in Europe. Actually, in Europe, there's classes of sports cars that are exempt as long as they're below certain volumes. In France, they have a special type of car. It's not highway legal, but it looks pretty good, but they're not. They're not. They would never meet the normal standards, and they do that for affordability. So the people, buy a $7,000, $6,000 car. So that's something that's interesting. I don't know if the U.S. will ever take that on, and in a way, that's why I think there's such a resurgence to classic car restoration.
Exactly.
That's one of the reasons I do what I do, because I kind of like the best of both. I like having a modern car for every day when you're stuck in the NASCAR-like traffic situations.
Totally. Yeah.
And then on the weekend, I love jumping into this super light, effortless little car from the 50s. There's something about it that's really liberating, like driving a motorcycle. But my wife will never let me. I want a Ducati so bad I can't even.
Oh yeah.
I've literally come close to also bringing one home without telling her, but that would cause major divorce issues.
Right.
But that sense of freedom and lightness is something that really appeals to me.
Sure. And we have our young kids to think about as well. So your daughter drives a vintage Fiat 500?
Yeah, she has a Compass, a Jeep Compass, but her love, and she fell in love with the car watching one of her cartoons. The car was featured quite in this Japanese anime cartoon.
Oh, cool.
And she just loves the car. I mean, and then I was half kidding with her, and I searched one like it as close as I could find, and found this yellow one. And the guy is a retired NASA engineer who loves small cars. He's kind of famous. He's been on Jay Leno's show. I've seen him at Cars and Coffee in the past. He's got like Isettas, and he has those kind of cars, Messerschmitts, and
very cool micro cars.
Yeah, he's a micro car guy. So I bought the car and just needed a little work. I ended up putting an Abarth engine in it because it was too slow. It was. I got on the boulevard. I'm like, this thing won't get out of it. So it was like 18 horsepower on a good day. So I found out you can buy completely built up Abarth motors for a scintillating 55 horsepower.
That's cool.
But in that car, it feels great. I mean, it really goes now. So she loves it.
Yeah.
And she had to learn.
So she uses that on the weekends?
Yeah. She goes run groceries. I don't let her get on the freeway with it just because it's so small. But it's fun. She learned how to drive a stick. I would never thought my daughter would be driving a stick. You know what they say about millennials, but she loves it. She drives it like a champ.
Good man. You did well.
Yeah.
So now that we're stuck at home with this COVID-19 stuff, I'm curious to get your perspective on its impact on the auto industry, and how long you think it's going to take for
it's significant
them to come back to normal.
Yeah, and I've been through the 2009 downturn, and this is very different. This is not as scary in a way that we kind of see a light at the end. We know there's probably a 2-3 month thing, so a lot of our planning is already adjusted. We immediately, looking at the other countries go through it, Italy went through it a good month and a half before we did. And we saw the measures they had to take, so we quickly did those things in the States. Sadly, we had to furlough some of our employees. Hopefully, most of that is temporary. And all of us at the executive level took significant pay cuts. So everybody's pitching in to try to weather the storm.
Right.
But the part that we didn't expect is, because every state's different. Some states don't allow dealers to sell cars at all. Others are allowing contactless delivery or digital sales, I guess.
Right.
And one thing that's happened is our IT guys have teamed up with our marketing folk and developed online sales for them. So dealers that were kind of doing things the old way were able to download this software, and we were helping them find customers. And it's actually, in some ways, compressed 5 years of development into a few months.
Oh, that's great.
So our whole network is just about digital now. So in a way, when we come out of this, we'll be farther ahead in terms of how to sell cars to a new generation of buyers. Because what's exciting is people are still shopping because they're home and they're on the internet. We see a lot of what we call lower funnel activity. So there's still a lot of interest. People are just waiting for the thing to be over. So, but in the meantime, we're not building cars. That's something that's never happened. Every single plant is dormant right now in the U.S. except for I think a few parts that we're making because we sell a lot of police cars and stuff, so we have to maintain those. But yeah, it's wild. Nothing I've ever seen before. But in a way, it's brought the company closer. Like we have such better meetings now because I still have staff meetings. I still have reviews. I'm on my butt from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. on my chair behind my laptop having meetings. The meetings take longer because everybody has a voice now, but it's actually cool. We were learning a lot about ourselves, and I think it's going to make us stronger when we get back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true that it's made us realize how things can be done differently and efficiently, and not necessarily you don't have to be there in person to make it happen. Obviously,
and I'm seeing
manufacturing needs to be done in person, but a lot of these meetings.
What's really cool is I'm seeing some great work out of my designers because they're saying they feel like they're in college again. They got their headphones on, they're locked away by themselves in their house.
Oh yeah.
And there's this jam, and you got the music, and they're sketching, and the work is incredible. I mean, it's really cool to see them thrive.
That's awesome.
In a new way.
What are some of your favorite all-time designs in cars?
Wow, in a way, that's my least favorite question because as a designer, I get to go to all these car shows. I get invited to. I went to Villa d'Este for the first time last year. I've been to Pebble, Amelia, so I get to see these all classic car shows, and I have a sweet spot in my heart for that 50s, like the Tipo 33 Stradales and the Scaglietti stuff. I mean, it's just some gorgeous cars, Bertonis of those times. So I'll always have a special place in my heart for that era of Italian design. It was just and they had no rules back then, no worries about craft regulations, just make the car beautiful.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And the same with American stuff back in the day was nice. Modern day cars are starting to get really pretty attractive and pretty distinctive, I would say. Companies over the last few years have really found their mojo and their own aesthetic. For a while, everyone was kind of copying everybody else. And, I think I'm seeing,
especially at the high end, there's a lot of cool things happening at the very high end.
Yeah. Even the Chinese companies, I'm finding they were definitely, you could look even 5 years ago, go to the Beijing Auto Show and you couldn't even tell a brand. It looks like copies of Jeeps and copies of this and that. Now they're actually breaking away and doing very unique things. So it's an exciting time. There's a lot of new expressions. The Germans have never been bolder. The grills are bigger than ever. The Lexus and it's like I feel like Chrysler went through that big grill stage back in 06 and 08. And now they're
right.
So some of that is like we're moving on to a different thing. We still have the very impressive trucks with their outsized front ends, but it's neat how much people are trying to give the cars so much character with design. Sometimes probably overcooking the design a little bit, in my opinion.
And I like how Tesla kind of broke the mold with their truck. Something totally unlike anything else there. Yeah.
I want to stick that thing in the wind tunnel, see how it works, 'cause
Oh yeah.
the wind tunnel is a black art. Every time we think something's slippery, it's not, and when it is, it doesn't look like it should be. I mean, it's not easy when you to deal with aerodynamics. It's not as easy as you.
Right. Well, you know that the Alfa Romeo SS, that thing had like a drag coefficient of like something ridiculous, like 0.26 or 0.27 or something
way
like
ahead
that.
of its time.
But of course, it's also a very small car, which helps a lot.
Yeah, that's the thing you're going to see too in the next few years. Is aerodynamics is everything. I mean that.
Oh yeah.
When you look at
when you're trying to squeeze out mileage,
especially
you
electric
pull
cars.
every lever you can.
They're very sensitive to aero because of dynamic. They don't like to be loaded at high speed, so that's when you really burn the juice down. So that's going to be interesting. How cars are going to get slippery. I always joke to my designers: there's a reason all airplanes look the same. So make sure you don't you don't do that to cars.
That's true. So what's the next personal project for you, either car wise or something fun that you?
Oh my goodness, that's a fun. There's one I'm actually working on. It's so I love Italian cars, but I'm also a big Mopar freak, and I'm currently working with Speedcore, a company out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, building a special Charger. It's a 1968 Charger, but extra modern. Like it will look old from a distance, but when you walk up to it, it's quite an amazing car. I saw a few of their works at SEMA show, and I fell in love with them. And it's like everything I do. It starts with a conversation. Next thing you know, the idea just mushrooms, and pretty soon I'm in the kitchen negotiating with my wife.
Yeah,
that's been going on for about a year. I don't want to tell you too much; it'll be a surprise, but it'll hope to get it done right around the end of the summertime. So.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Check out my Instagram. I'll be posting all about it.
Well, maybe we should do a film on it.
Yeah, it'd be fun. Actually, it's kind of 3/4 of the way done, but it's in a cool phase now where it's like a model kit car. It's all spread apart everywhere.
Sounds great.
But this is a weird one because I build mostly my own cars. This is the first time I'm entrusting somebody else to do it. So that's gonna be interesting.
It's amazing that you still find the time to build your own cars and still be the head of the side for it.
It's cathartic. If I didn't do it, I would be a grumpy old man. I mean, it really helps. Yeah. Because luckily, the way my house is set up, my garage is right attached to my house. So after dinner, after I get home from work, I have dinner quickly. Usually frozen dinner. Yeah. We have Friday night date nights, but the rest of the time it's frozen dinner. And I go to the garage for about 2 hours. I just tinker, and then I come back, do emails, and that's it. So I pick at it. Yeah. It's like knitting. You do a little here, a little there.
Sure.
Yeah. But work always takes, what's interesting about this COVID thing, I haven't flown anywhere in almost 2.5 months. And I'm usually in the airport every other weekend. So it's I'm getting all this time I didn't know what to do with.
Right.
So I'm pretty much caught up on all my projects now.
That's amazing. Like so many people are, doing personal projects as a result of this thing, learning something new or tending to stuff that they haven't.
How are you keeping your time? For a while. I get to ask a couple questions, I hope, on the podcast.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. We've been really good about the whole quarantine. So the only time we leave the house is to go for a walk for exercise and stuff. But except for that, it's been great spending time with our daughter Luna, who's almost 5 now, and teaching her stuff. I play a lot of chess with her, and trying to get her to play more piano, but she likes it. She's a little resistant to practice, but just doing those kind of things. Oh, and a lot of cooking. So made a delicious roast last night, and
you download the instructions and try to copy them. Is that how you do it? Or
exactly, yeah.
Wow.
But sadly, no car stuff. So I haven't taken advantage of the empty roads to go drive 100 miles an hour like a lot of people have been doing these days.
Funny, I do a little testing. I sneak out at night just to do a little calibration work, and there's the local police know me by now, so they leave me alone. They kind of wave at me. There's that guy.
Yeah, it's calibration work. Yeah.
It's funny. Date night with my wife is her with the laptop on her. Either she drives. Sometimes she'll drive, and I might have the laptop. But sometimes I'll have her put in the cells for me as I try to keep the constant RPM there.
Right.
But I love that. I'm such a nerd with that. I'm trying to get it down to perfect stoichiometric mixture. Yeah, you've heard of BC, right? BC Moto.
Of which one? BC Moto? Yeah.
Yeah. He's become a good friend of mine, so he's helped me a lot with calibration. So I've
nice.
I've evolved modern injection in my older cars now, so it's a lot of fun.
Well, thanks so much. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that I
Yeah,
didn't touch on?
a couple things I would like to say about the industry. I would say,
Yeah, please.
because we're trying to find, for a while we're having trouble finding young designers that want to do cars because
Mhm.
there's a bit of a perception that, especially with Detroit automakers, that we're, it's kind of old fashioned stuff. But what I'm finding in the last 5 years is the car is almost half a computer. It's more of a rolling computer now than it is a car. So we're actually hiring different types of designers than we were before. Not in the
Mhm.
old days we'd hire styling guys that just made the car look cool, and even try to make exterior guys do interiors. Now we're hiring dedicated interior guys, dedicated infotainment people, dedicated. So our team, the complexion of our team has changed so much. And we're
Mhm.
finding by getting some of these kids that would have gone to tech industry coming to Detroit are actually having a blast. They're like, wow, I didn't realize they could create a machine that has so many attributes and dimensions and affects people's lives in such a cool way. So just get the word out there. Anybody who wants to get into the industry, or
Oh yeah,
just Google it, kind of reverse engineer it. It's there's some great schools in California. There's some great schools all over the world. But
absolutely.
we
The
do
art
hire
center. Yeah.
from outside the design schools. We're trying to really mix it up a little bit, get video game designers out of the basement and get them into our shops.
That's really great to hear.
Yeah.
It actually brings up a question. The whole infotainment
Mhm.
issue in car design is
Mhm.
an interesting one because on the one hand, it seems like you guys are doing so much to try to keep up with, let's say, Apple or
Mhm.
Samsung or Android. Why not just partner with them and just have them take over,
Yeah,
that whole part?
you're absolutely correct, and that's been our approach. We have a very good relationship with Amazon and actually with Android, Google.
Uh-huh.
We actually been partnering with Google to help them develop their CarPlay, their Android Auto system. And because we can never beat the tech industry is just so big and so fast at that. So we have
Right.
done quite a bit of that, but there's definitely some ego there. Not maybe so much with
Yeah.
us, but every auto company wants to kind of control their own destiny because there is some money to be made if you get it right. There's a bit of
Of course.
so everybody wants a bit of that, but we're realizing that people expect the car to work like their phones. They really want that seamless interaction with all their devices. So I think you're onto
Right.
something. I think part of it's going to be a lot of it's going to be collaboration with a little bit of customization to make sure that the brand comes through. Because the cars of the future, I mean, we're going to have cars that are we're going to talk about inches of screens in your car like you talk about TVs,
Yeah, exactly.
Total of 38 inches of screen in my car. And with that, it's just blank screen if you don't populate it, right? So that's one of the places my department's growing a lot is
Uh-huh.
in that space. We're hiring. I mean, we've grown it from 3 people to close to 30
Right.
that just do nothing but infotainment design. So it's a lot of fun, a whole new world for us.
That's good. And also the upgradability of it, because
Mhm.
that's the part that becomes obsolete the quickest, obviously, because
Yeah,
the industry changes so fast there. So,
yeah.
whereas a 10-year-old car can still mechanically be really,
Mhm.
still current and relevant. Its electronics are so outdated
Mhm.
compared to what's available today. So, is there work being done to make those components more upgradable
That's
so that the
that's
Mhm.
exactly what we're doing. The Uconnect 5, and I would say Tesla is definitely ahead of the game on that. That's pretty much
Mhm.
their platform from day one. And the industry is going that way. In China, you see a lot of that happening with Chinese automakers. We have our new Uconnect 5, which was supposed to launch a few months ago, but the different
Uh-huh.
shows got canceled. But we will have that pretty much in all our cars in the next year or so. We'll start populating it as we launch new cars. And that is exactly what you're saying. It's going to be pretty much on the air, updatable anytime we want.
Mhm.
And we can have a great relationship with the customer where we can, if they allow us, we can have an ongoing relationship with them for the life of the car.
Right.
So it's
That's
going to
good
be
to
fun.
hear.
That's going to really change how we approach design and how we, you don't just launch and leave a car. You're going to be able to launch the car and keep developing apps for it, just like your phone, right? So it's going to be fun,
For sure. Yeah.
a lot of fun. But that takes talent. We got to find all that talent now.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Well, thank you so much,
Oh,
Ralph.
what a pleasure to talk
Really
to you.
enjoyed the conversation, and hope that once your project is done, that we can
Yeah,
come check it out and
you
maybe do another film with you
you have
or
an
do
open
a first
invitation
film.
to Michigan anytime.
Thank you again, Ralph Gilles, for joining us. Visit Ralph on Instagram at Ralph Gilles. And a special thank you to all of our Petrolicious fans joining us from all over the world. Join us next time for another conversation on Petrolicious Talks. I'm Afshin Behnia, reminding you to always drive tastefully.